Hi everyone. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound. Hello and welcome to the Broken Rails 1211th New Social Environment. I'm Min, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Caroline Absher and Andrew Woolbright. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Caroline Absher was born in North Carolina in 1994. Her vocabulary is informed by intensely saturated and vibrant palettes, comprising a series of powerful iridescences that expand her canvas in space. She received a BFA from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Absher's recent solo and group exhibitions include Persona at Fredericks and Freiser in New York, Lighting Striking Blue at JournalGallery in Stockholm, among others. And our host today, artist, curator, and critic Andrew Woolbright, is based in Brooklyn, New York, and is an MFA graduate from RISD in painting. Woolbright is the founder and director of the gallery in Below Grand, located on the Lower East Side in New York. In addition to curating, he is an editor-at-large at the Broken Rail. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Andrew. To get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great seeing all of you. It's always fun to do these. And I'm so excited to get to talk to Caroline Absher today about a show that I wish we could all go to right now on this rainy, gray day in New York and see in LA. But I was fortunate enough to get to see it before it shipped out to LA. And it's an incredible, stunning painting show. Really excited for this conversation. I have a million questions, but first, just want to say, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing?
Hey, thank you so much. I'm doing really well. Yeah,
Good.
I just got back to New York, and like you said, it's really beautiful out, so everything's great.
Yeah, good. I'm actually calling you, or we're Zooming from your old alma mater at Pratt Institute. And I wanted to maybe start there, if you feel comfortable with it, of talking about where you came from in your education, because it's really, I think it's in the work, but like you were an art history major. Like how does that kind of define your, I mean, obviously you're making the whole time, but how does that encourage your practice?
So I went to Pratt for initially art history because I had been painting my whole life, and I didn't quite understand the difference between a fine arts degree and just being able to paint in my own free time. And I thought that it would be cool to have those academic classes and lectures and stuff instead of the studio time, because I knew that I would always paint anyway, or that was my logic at the time. And then I realized that Pratt actually had this program that could combine art history and painting. So I ended up doing that. I forgot what it was called, but it was a really interesting way to combine all of the different like lecture classes and also a studio practice class.
That's really cool. We're doing a great plug for Pratt today, which
I
is
know.
awesome. But I want to talk about your current show because I've been following your work for a number of years now, and I'm excited to talk about the way it's changed and shifted and how it feels on your perspective to see those changes and shifts. But I remember our first conversation about this show. Part of it was this book that you had found, Psychic Voyages. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So I have always so I live in Brooklyn, and I've lived in Brooklyn since 2012, and I love, I don't know, I'm kind of a romantic in this way where I love finding things on the street and letting them kind of like be signs from the universe. And I don't know, I always have my eye out for stuff like in the garbage and on stoops. And if you live in Brooklyn, you'll know that there's always stuff out on the sidewalk and on the steps. And I wasn't even looking for anything that day, but I came across this book called Psychic Voyages. And I don't know, it just like really, really, really got into my brain like for a while. And it was COVID. And there wasn't much to do, and everyone was just kind of holed up at home. And so I was reading this book, and I started like hyperfixating on the ideas in this book. It's basically just, talking about how um that we may have access to an expanded consciousness, and like the way that the brain works and the memories and like the structure of uh just talking about neuroscience and combining my love of science and um, just trying to figure out how our minds work. Yeah. And like, when I was at Pratt, of course, we read John Berger and Ways of Seeing, and like, it was all kind of tying together in that book for me in the moment. And so I was like, all right, I have to try some of this stuff out. And then I started going really deeply into the meditations that were described in the book. And that kind of sent me off on this journey and like kind of became the new body of work.
Hmm. Well, I mean, it already just so much of your language comes through in the painting. Like I love like this idea. I mean, your paintings remain so open. Like I like that it never arrives at any one thing. There's language elements which I want to talk to you about. There's elements of nature. There are images getting kind of cycled through each of these ways. You're drawing from a lot of different sources to come up with these kind of voids, these beautiful chromatic fields of abstraction. And I like that it's just like it's connected to maybe I mean, do you call that like a romantic process, a mystical process? Do you feel comfortable defining it of kind of yourself trying to remain open to things coming into the work?
I think that it's a really I mean, I watch a lot of interviews and read a lot of interviews of painters that I love, and it's funny because you can never tell if you're kind of like regurgitating the ideas of the painters and artists that you love so much, or if they're yours. But like something that really rings true for me, I'm sure that so many artists have said it before me, is that there's definitely this kind of like balance and yin and yang thing happening between control over what you want to see in the thing that you're making, and also the release of that control, and to give it up and to kind of let go of your expectations for it and allow this, like in your words, mystical thing to come in. And I don't know if there's a definition for whatever that is. I think that it's something akin to a flow state, or there's another word that I love using that's escaping me now, but yeah, that flow state is something that is kind of universal in all creative capacities. Like everyone kind of, if you can get there, and if you've experienced it, then you get it, and it's not really, it's a very cool thing that happens. And I think that if I'm able to get there in a painting session, it's not easy, but if I am, then usually really amazing things happen, and then that ends up being the thing that shows in the work.
Can you talk more about that, or are there things that you do to kind of or successful things that you found to get yourself into that flow state or that place of kind of creative play or like creative working through things? Or do you have a routine, or you have to kind of find it each day?
So, yes, okay. So, well, what's really interesting that I've always found is my mind in normal waking life when I'm not painting it's the word cacophony comes to mind, but it's just very, very intense in my brain. Like there's a million things. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with like labeling whatever the way that it works. I'm not sure if there's a specific label. I haven't been diagnosed or anything, but like it's kind of wild. It's just I don't know if anxiety is the word, but it's just very logical, and I'm always kind of, I tend to ruminate on all possible options of like anything that arises. And so even if it's something very simple, I can find myself looking at it from like 20,000 different angles. And something happens when I'm painting where it just, everything disappears and I'm thinking of absolutely nothing at all. And it's the one time, it's the one kind of place that I can be where there's just absolutely nothing there. And I can't really tell you like what the leap or jump is to that point, but it definitely happens. It's definitely possible. And so if I could, one thing I talk a lot about is like anyone who's struggling with anxiety or depression or just, anything at all, it's possible to achieve a state of like mental clarity and peace, and you just have to figure out like what it is. And I think painting for me is a way to get there. And also, I'm not really sure how I get there though. I just start painting and then I just start painting, which is the hardest part.
Yeah, it is the hardest part. Well, I mean, just last week was able to hear Chris Martin talk about his show, and he was talking about it. Him and Catherine Bradford talking about painting is this like that. I think what in a lot of ways similar to how you're describing it, which is that weird thing painters know, where you're like incredibly present to
Yeah.
the point that you're not thinking, and then also like there's this weird obsession where you're doing something that you are hoping you've never done before, and also that you're making a mark that you know you'll never be able to make again. There's this like kind of like the minute you lay something down, you're like that move is over, you know, and it's I don't know what that space is, but it's a very unique space.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that one note on the marks that can't be made again, I think that's kind of why I love it so much, is because it's so high stakes, and there's an element
Yeah.
of that kind of like, I guess you could call it a type of high maybe, because you're like, everything that I'm doing now is, it's high stakes for me, but for no
Mhm.
one else. And I think that
Yeah.
there's something really yeah, it's I love it.
Yeah. Well, something, I mean, just to kind of jump in to give some language for the viewers, like one thing that I really loved getting to see these paintings in person is they're incredibly textured. Like they have a real buildup and accumulation to them. A lot of the marks that you're leaving down have real physical texture, generosity to it. You're making moves that are really difficult to remove, but then also there are a lot of cases of removing them. And I know a big part of your practice is making moves and then trying to erase it all away and removal. And can you talk more about that process? Because I think it's something that I mean, the images of these paintings are stunning, but that's an experience that gets lost without seeing them in person.
Yes, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about, is the process of making the final paintings, which is never really the intention, or the goal for me is not the final product. It's the process, very much so. And I think that like you said, the content and the images and the subjects, they are not so much, it makes more sense for them to be a little bit more embedded and subdued, because they're not the full point. They're a little bit of it, but it's not the whole thing. So I don't know. When I make the paintings, I start with an idea, and then very quickly and rapidly the idea completely dissolves and it has to become something new. And I know going in that the idea is going to change and everything's going to change. And I think that it's always been that way for me. Like I've never really ended with something that I wanted to end with, or thought that I would end with. And so it's a lot about making something and then stepping back from it. And maybe it's like the second or third layer after going in and again and again. And then you look at it and you're like, okay, it's not the thing, it's not it. And so even if, objectively speaking, if someone else came into my studio and saw the painting and was like, that's pretty good to me, that looks good to me, looks like one of your paintings to me, it's just not like it for me. And so I have to go back, and oftentimes I'll just completely destroy the work in order to make something new. But the thing about destroying it or covering it up or going over it is that it's honestly the best part, because you're revealing all of these really beautiful transparencies and moments and intricacies and colors and like all this stuff that I couldn't have possibly done consciously is starting to happen. And the best moments of the work, in my opinion, like for me, they're always the things that happened when I am in the process of destroying something that already existed. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like so much of it, I mean, it really is such a like really wonderful confidence that comes from it. Of like, one thing I really appreciate in seeing them is like there's this great relationship to moments that I can tell are painted on the floor or painted flat, and like gamsol or turpentine kind of like, removing the color and turning into a void again, and then going back on the wall and marks getting applied again, and that feeling of easel or wall to floor feels like it's like a really active circuit. It doesn't feel like it starts one way and ends one way. It feels like it's um, a certain type of certainty that you have to be able to change it at any step, flip it, move it, and I think that physicality comes through in these really stunning color effects that you're able to get from like really moving the paintings around.
Thank you. Yeah, one note about the floor painting is that that's something that I've loved doing for a long time. I remember when I was in school learning about like Frankenthaler, I saw this amazing video of her moving stuff around on the floor with these beautiful grand gestures in this like really crisp white collared shirt. And I just never got that out of my head. And then I started working on the floor and realized that it demands a completely different movement. I mean, it's like a completely different gesture and line, and like you can't even try it on the wall. So yeah, I started getting really into it and deciding that I was going to be one of those like really messy painters, and I'm just completely covered in paint and pigments, which is probably not healthy, but like I love getting just really really into it. And yeah, and then you put it back on the wall and it looks totally different because there's a sense of gravity that's happening because it's oil, so everything is still wet. And it's not so much that it drips, but it's like the material moves and shifts and stuff because of gravity. And I love watching all that happen. And not to overuse the word alchemy, because I'm sure a lot of painters use it, but like it really is. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember a dear friend Molly Zuckerman Hartung was telling me that like the best advice she's ever given as a student when she started painting was that like gravity is unavoidable. That like working flat is like one of the best available techniques we have to like let things kind of pour away from each other or spill away from each other, and she was told and passed it along, I think, or does, that like the wall is so much about making it into a picture or making it make sense in some ways, but that floor space is like, how do I kind of just wrestle with that alchemical space? And I love that you're fearlessly taking on both and going back and forth between that. But now that we're on this image, I think there's a good place to switch over, because there might be there is a psychic voyage in some ways. There is this just structured space that you are going to and building, but like a sense of language and script, and like the way you're using marks in a way that maybe at times suggests calligraphic or at the times are language. Can you talk about the language that you use as reference points and when you use them?
yes. So well, I write in cursive. I always have, and my mother has amazing handwriting, and I always wanted to have handwriting like her. So I was always very consciously aware of I guess the simple term of like beauty in handwriting. And that's why I love a lot of different languages, like maybe using the ink brush and all that. But I think when you're trying to make a gesture that's completely, sometimes in the painting, you come to a point where you're not sure really what to do. And it's not so much that the decision is superfluous or it didn't need to happen. It in fact does very much need to happen, but the decision making part of your brain doesn't exactly know what to do. So then you just start like making marks and just start drawing and stuff. And I think instead of a lot of paintings that I love and see, like I'm thinking of maybe like Stigmar Polk or something, but those marks, you can tell that they're coming from a place of like not quite subconscious, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's not that it's not an intentional thing. And so whenever I start to do that, it always comes out like writing, but it's not writing. It's just it's almost like, yeah, it's writing, but it's not writing. And then sometimes when I've only done it a couple times in paintings that I've like shown, and every time people are like, what does it say, what does it say? And I don't mind that. I actually love that you don't know what it says and that it looks like it's like a secret hidden language.
Good. Well, let's protect that. I won't ask that question, even though I wish I could know the answer to it. But I mean, I think the other sense of language is that, like, regardless of legible language or distinct language, like, I mean, and maybe this comes in from the art historical side of things, but there is like, this kind of classical idea of painting where it's like, there is maybe this sense of like, um, the from the language you use of like kind of cacophony or taking on everything. But all that being said, like each mark makes the mark next to it really work. Like there is like it might in some ways feel like a really unregulated field of expression, but like I really appreciate this kind of classical idea that like each mark balances the mark next to it. And I guess what I'm saying is that feels like a sense of language too, that like each word builds up to a sentence, even if I don't know what that sentence is. I trust it because there's a structure that you're really aware of.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that
I
wasn't
mean,
a
like,
question.
yes. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking at this painting, and yeah, there's definitely, it's like this swirling vortex. There's a lot of there's so much. I think that the speed in which it was made is not necessary. There's so many layers, and so there is this sense of history and time to it, but then the top layer, it feels very quick and like fast and very the motion of it all and is. But then also there's the subject who's riding a horse away in at the top register. There's this figure this kind of hidden world within. And I think, and then of course, like the main figure who's gazing out at the viewer, that is not necessarily meant to be seen. I don't mind that people never see them, but I do want them to make sense in the painting without being seen. If that, I don't know if that came out right, but like what you were saying about how all the marks have a structure and that they make sense together, I need that to happen regardless of whether or not the viewer picks up on the embedded figures.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, well, and now I'm going to do it, but maybe not to reuse the word alchemy too much, but it feels like it's the ingredients are very important, whether or not the poetic materials make sense as a whole or they're transferable is less important than like you were kind of casting the spell of what makes sense together to make the thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like let's ask a question that I mean, trying to play the audience here. For they are sometimes difficult to see in images, but I would imagine maybe someone might want to ask. In past shows, the figure has really been present. The body has really been present in some of your paintings, and in these, they are, and you can see them if you see them in person. You look up close, you can see the figures as distinct. Can you talk about that process of maybe trusting the void of space or kind of taking the figure slowly? You haven't totally removed the figure, but is that uh, how much of that process is something that you're excited about for this work, and is this how you a change that you're going to be consistent with, I guess?
Okay, so I think like I'm looking at this printout of one of my paintings from my show in 2022 with Fredericks and Freiser, and the figure is quite embedded. But I'm thinking of the experience of making that show, which was a few years ago now, where it really felt like the levee broke, so to speak, with the whole visual language and the way that I painted I think that having the privilege to spend a lot of time on painting and really just get into it, and really that was what ultimately changed the way that the paintings ended up looking. But I don't think that there was anything necessarily conscious about it. I think that with I'm always gonna want the narrative device of I love this idea of the feminine figure kind of guiding you through this world, and I love using figures because they tell stories. But also, I really, really, really love the experience of making these paintings, and like whatever needs to happen, I think has to happen. Like I just have to follow it. But I do think that over time, it's not necessarily, I think maybe in a show, there doesn't have to be a figure in every single one. Maybe one of them doesn't, or one of them, it's not, I don't want it to be formulaic ever. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm happy. I really like your answer to it. Going on with it, because I also want to like preserve the parts of these really important parts of your process that you need to keep to yourself to generate these incredible paintings. But like when you say narrative, or when you say that like you need a feminine figure to generate a narrative, do you feel comfortable giving us an example of like what was a starting point to get into the layers of abstraction that might no longer be present? Or is that something you want to keep to yourself?
Oh, you mean like, yes. Okay. So there's this one painting. It's like, it's hot pink, and I don't know if it's called Violet Ether. Okay, this painting has a central figure, and she is kind of emitting a sort of like energetic wave, a pulsation of something. But it's not necessary to see her at first. You enter into this atmospheric kind of area, and you sense that there's something, maybe a presence, and there's depth, because the painting before it was a fully complete blue painting. But then I added her, and then I kind of put her in very lightly, very gently. And I think that she is so important to the painting, but I also really love how she's not so clear. And I think that creating that balance between there and not there, and like but while also achieving an emotional effect, like I feel that this painting is very emotional. It's very I don't know, you feel something, especially if you're in any way like me, because I made it. But I think that, yeah, that balance is really hard to get, but I want to prioritize achieving that. And then of course, once I figure out how to achieve it consistently, then I'll have to move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the way you're describing that, which is like it feels, maybe, or maybe I'm interpreting, but it feels almost like protective of this idea of this woman that you're beginning with, the image that you're depicting. Like it's about her, but also you don't want her seen, and there's this complicated relationship to like the gaze, or visibility and not visibility, of like wanting to make it about her without maybe an objectification. Like how much of that is like is getting into the work maybe of like the protection of subjects, or like trying to get the energy of someone, but maybe is it a suspicion of depiction?
Wow, I really love the way that you just said that. Yeah, I think that they're very much protected by me. I think that I feel very protective over them all, and always have. They're not, it's yeah, I think that's what's happening here. Like
Cool.
I don't know. You said it perfectly.
Well, I mean, I guess, and I also want to be careful with the protection and be respectful of that. But I do wonder, is there a type of body or a type of woman, or like, where are you drawing the images from? Are they images that you read, see? Are they things that you desire, look at? Or are they images that you're constructing and drawing from life? Like, how are you, the women that you're protecting when they get into it, where are they kind of being sourced from, if you don't mind?
Yes. So basically, like, it's an energy. It's like who they
Mhm.
feel, like they are to me. And sometimes I'm mixing like all sorts of different visual references that I've accumulated over years and years. And for example, like I'll use a body, a form that I'm really interested in, and then I'll put someone else's head on it or something, and then I use a different light source, and then I'm always constantly changing the exact, they're all kind of like combinations of, and then of course I draw, and draw from life, and draw from my just mind's eye, and they're from everywhere. I mean, the wall on my studio is like covered in stuff, like just ephemera, references from books and magazines and stills from movies. I worked in film for a while, and I have like film brain a little bit, and I do love getting into conversations about directors and cinematographers and lighting, and how all of those beautiful stages, scenes have already been set. But I think that for artists to directly take from cinema is a little bit, I don't know. I think I really try to make them my own, if they do already exist in some way. But yeah, the references are from everywhere.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's another form of that protection of like trying to enter in a recognizable iconic image into the symbolic, or trying to uh unreveal it so it becomes like the energy itself rather than like the thing that we can judge or see, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that there's always a point of reference that somebody can latch onto. And I
Hmm.
think that if somebody is latching on to something in particular about one of the figures or in the paintings, then they can use that as the starting point for the thread in their mind or something, or wherever
Hmm.
they go with that. It's like, it's important. I don't know if I mean, everything reminds us of something.
Yeah.
So
Well, I always appreciate when artists, especially painters, trust that, which is like
yeah.
yeah, we have to trust that things become associative. Um, well, this exact painting just brought up another question, but before I get into that one, can we go back one slide? Um, Something, and I don't remember if this is the case for this painting, but something I did want to bring up is something I enjoyed in your studio was realizing that the borders of your paintings are sometimes some of the first layers of the paintings, or it's like
Yes.
you're revealing the beginning of the thing, and then the void out in the space is trying to like remove or burnish through that in some ways. Is that the case with this one? Can you talk about that?
Yes. Thank you for noticing. My borders are it's a really, really fun part of my painting, because I love color theory, and I love just the balance of that our eye can create by just one tiny speck of like one tiny color in the corner can completely change the entire painting. And I've always been obsessed with this idea that the smallest little thing can change everything, and especially visually. And so the borders, what they do is they give me a point of reference for a color palette that I can then work either with or against throughout the rest of the painting. So if I start with a big abstraction that is just pretty wild, and then I start going in, I recently have left a little bit of the edges in order to then work from that. So for example, if the edges are largely blue, in this case, the underpainting was mostly blue and purple, then naturally I was going to go in with like a hot pink and orange because it just makes sense color wise. And so I wanted those colors to speak to each other. So of course it makes, because I think sometimes with paintings, there are so many decisions to be made, and it's like a infinite kind of thing laid out before you, and it can be very daunting and overwhelming. And I think that this border situation it's been how I deal with that like infinite possibility thing. So yeah, it allows me to speak to the colors, and it's very helpful for me, but also I love the way it looks.
Yeah. Well, I love that it's a function of like, yeah, like Goethe's color theory, which is like the kind of radical idea that nothing in the middle matters. Like
Yes.
our sense of color is just what is on the edge, and it tells us everything. But I like that it's that, like you said, very formal color theory, but then it's also like a type of memory Goethe of like you're reminding the middle of what it once was, or there's a type of like contextualization that comes from the frame. So it's like a time or a sense of memory and a sense of color that's coming through it, which is a cool artifact.
Thank you.
Can we in the now? Okay, now I feel ready for the next slide because I wanted to ask about that one. There is something, and I want to be very careful of. We always resist definitions and things, but there is a sense of space here that I feel like looking at a lot of your work maybe is something that comes through as a type of abstract motif, which is like you do have these zones, like a top zone and a bottom and different ideas, and then maybe like a push and pull. It could be like in some ways it gives me like a type of Rothko segmentation, but then maybe like Frank Bowling is like a type of color sensibility. But I'm wondering like how you think about like there needs to be a zone here and a zone here. Is that like a dialectic relationship, or is that just something you find you gravitate towards when you're making paintings?
Well, two things. Okay, so I think that it has a lot to do with what I was mentioning earlier, which was working through something, realizing it doesn't work, and then you just you're trying to you're trying to kind of get something out of it at the end of the session, and you have these really grand gestures, these really wild decisions that are made, and those are almost always it's not so much to it goes back to the layering thing where it's all about just layering and layering and layering, covering up, and until it starts to do something really cool. And I'm like, okay, it's almost there, it's almost happening, but it has almost nothing to do with like the structure of the painting is not totally. I feel like I've said this too many times now, but it's not totally conscious. I think it's inherent because I did have academic training in,
Right.
you know, composition and balance and value and space and all that. And so I think ultimately it's really hard to unlearn that stuff. Like, I don't know. I don't know how much of it is learned, but this one
Right.
in particular, there is definitely a sense of the floating weight and the nature of this top area, and then it's
Yeah.
almost like hovering over the rest of the painting, and those are things I don't want to give too much credit to this kind of like flow. Like I am very much thinking about the function of the material and what it does, and transparency versus all the opacities of that paint can have. So yeah, I'm really thinking about the push and the pull and what it does, but I don't think that you can force it. I really don't think you can force it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think, and I think that is a good note to bring up, and especially considering that some young artists might be listening in, that there is this incredible bravura and this real command you have over brush making, and then your fearlessness to destroy the whole thing and make this really chromatic gray or umber that's created from all this color being erased away with turpentine. But that destructive or that erasure is a very slow process. Like it might be a fast process of doing the thing as an event, but then it is like you're kind of drawing with the erasure, saying like that transparent thing over that other thing really works. Like I want to keep that and build off of that. And so it isn't just destruction for destruction's sake. It's like that's what I'm
Right.
saying is it's a really thoughtful and reverse painting or an anti-painting of like removal.
Yes. Yeah, I do a lot of scraping and like wiping away with a lot of turpentine and raking. You mentioned the turpentine grays. Those are some of the best grays ever. I get really
Mhm.
nerdy about that because it's so you make a whole painting and then you're like, no, this is wrong. And then you put it on the floor and you start raking it around and suddenly you have this gorgeous color that ties
Yeah.
everything together, and all of the colors that you use from that point forward, they are linked to that color because they're
Mhm.
in it. And so yeah, you can't fake that, you can't force that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really poetic way of making an integrated palette. It's just letting the kind of accumulation of all of it sink together into a really nice gray. But I'm wondering, like, I have a theory that every painter has a set of rules that they follow. Not maybe not for their entire life, or maybe it's not consistent. But I wonder because I see things in your work, and I think other people do of like maybe things that are not entirely consistent because you are all keeping these paintings open. But I wonder if there are rules that you had for this particular body of work, or there are things that if you did would feel like a not Caroline painting to you that you're like, this is an important priority for maybe this body of work.
Yes, I would say that the rule for me is to feel like I got somewhere new with
Mhm.
each painting because um I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of like constant forward motion. I think it's definitely fine to just be and exist somewhere
Mhm.
for potentially many years. And many artists have, and many artists that I admire so much have. But for me, I'm very, very interested in getting better and like going further. And I think that if the painting doesn't feel like it reached a new place, then I don't necessarily want it to be seen.
Mhm. Yeah, I like
But I
that.
don't
I
know.
mean,
That's definitely gonna change. I don't. It's not something that like I don't think that it's sustainable to be in that space for a long time. But I think it's just
yeah.
right now.
When you finish a painting, do you use that knowledge to begin the next one, or is it like a total break? Like, how's that doubling back process of kind of like some of the things that you're finding work?
I mean, yes, I'm definitely using the knowledge. I'm using everything. It's almost like rapid absorbing, kind of downloading. Like you're just every mark you make, it's put into the log of all of the things that you can do from that point
Mhm.
forward. Or at least for me, that's how painting worked. And I think that that's why it feels so endless, and that there's a lot of like hope and possibility, that the feeling of that like possibility is something that I really cherish with painting.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I have I mean, not to get too kitchen sink psychologist or like, but I guess I have a question about desire for you because you mentioned like the calligraphy has a relationship to your mother's handwriting, or like you're like that's a beautiful handwriting I desire, and some of the images of women you've worked with in the past are images of women that are like beautiful in a certain way where you're like that there's an enticement there. And I'm wondering about like because I think that's such a complex process that you're doing and I also don't want to flatten it into it always begins with like a desire, but but there are moments where it feels like maybe it's a painful thing of like, or protective thing of erasing that image and trying to find it again. I guess my question is, what is that relationship of desiring something like within your work when it starts with the images?
I think that well, the reading that I have selected for later has to do with this, which is so incredible that you just brought that up. But I think without quoting it directly, because I will be reading it, is there's something I don't know why I'm like this, but I've always had a deep sense of almost like future nostalgia or longing
Hmm.
for something that doesn't quite exist. Or yeah, it's like this kind of feeling that I know that everything that is before me will soon change or go away, or there's this sense of like impermanence to everything. And I think that the paintings reflect that very much. And I think that on a very kind of base level um, way of seeing it, like beauty is also incredibly fleeting. And so, you know, these objectively like beautiful things or moments or passages or color palettes that I'm working with, they're made from the perspective of somebody who is trying to like capture them while they can. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that comes through in the work, and I guess that's why I asked and what I wanted to get to is that like that I think beauty is a difficult subject for all of us to handle and deal with. But what I like about your sense of like when you talk about that word is I get that real sense of the kind of fear of the uniqueness of beauty that like the minute you see it, it's about ready to be gone. There's like a type of anxiety of beauty that happens of like it's on its way out the door. I saw this thing and it's gone. And like you're able to formally generate that through your process in a way that I think is really effective.
Thanks.
And I mean, while we're on the top, not that it matters for anything, but this is my favorite painting I got to see in your studio. I just think it's like such a, like this apparition or this like really streaked kind of crimsony gray mark, like over what could be a cave wall, or it could be a wall of language, or it could be something like it gives me the vibes of Francis Bacon's jet of water, like just frozen, like an active event thrown or frozen into a paused thing. And just the strangeness of seeing like a streak or a spout of water or a ghost frozen in a moment. Like I love the floating of that thing.
Thank you. Well, yeah, the capturing of something that doesn't really want to be captured is like it's so good. I love paintings that do that, and Francis Bacon is such a perfect example of that. And also the quickness and the motion and the emotional, because not even, I mean, the emotional state that you're in when you look at a certain work of art, it could change in a fraction of a second. Like every new experience, every time you look at a painting, it changes and you change, and it's just like the everything is just constantly in flux. And so I think that when paintings are able to kind of do that thing that you described, it's really special. And I think that with this painting, when I stopped here, it was almost like all of the cells in my body were like, do not touch this painting again. And it's like I really wanted to. Well, I didn't want to, but most of the time I do, and I kind of override it, and then it goes awry. But for this one, it was very, very strong. And I just noticed that. So yeah.
And maybe that's part of why I enjoy it so much is that feeling of like it's like when you hit the brakes on a fast moving car and it just is like makes the whole thing shake. That feeling of like I really want to make one more mark, but I didn't. Like it's so satisfying, but also it creates a really vital energy to this of just like um, letting this thing be somewhat unconcluded or in a way. But it really comes off as an apparitional kind of spectral thing in a way that I love.
Yeah, the hidden thing that maybe not everybody needs to see at first that I added just to add was I added this little butterfly in the top right corner, and I titled it Angel's Path because I imagined that the marks were the path of this creature, if you
Mm,
could see them. So yeah.
mm, I love that. Can we go back to there are slides of a diptych or like yeah. Because the other thing is like I'm wondering like there's also a part of me for this painting that gets close to almost like a Rauschenberg factum one, factum two of like it's not entirely the left painting is completely copied on the right, but there is like a type of memory of each other or semblance of each other or like a near reflection that I think is conceptually really interesting to do a really expressionistic painting and then kind of not entirely mirror it, but get close.
Yeah, this one, it was about telepathy because I was reading like
Hmm.
everything I could find on what we know about telepathy. And so
Yeah.
there are these two figures that are connected through um, the similar motions of they're in the paintings, they're connected through the paintings.
Yeah. And that's like, yeah, telepathy or like sympathetic magic of like borrowing and the transference, maybe getting into it. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool in this one. Well, I wonder, Caroline, what's like, and this is like maybe a little foreshadowing, but like for you, like, is there a consistent thing that you feel like you need to keep the same moving forward with your work, or like what is the kind of like Amy Silman talks about like every artist, like what is your unit, or like what is the irreducible thing that you have to keep chasing or building around or tearing down around. I'm wondering if there's like a unit to these paintings that you found yet, or if it's still a continual search.
Um, I think that allowing myself to expand uh, is very important in a conceptual and emotional and uh, practical way as well. I think that it's important to allow your beliefs and like thought patterns to go beyond what you think is really possible. And with painting, there is that kind of uncertainty of like the space beyond where I have achieved, the space beyond what I could do at this point, and I just have to keep believing that that is possible and that I don't that I'm always gonna be looking for that. Yeah, so I think it is mostly just to continue searching.
Hmm. Yeah. And I have one other question, which is like something I also really enjoy about your work is like, and also poetically taking it back to the beginning or callback, which is I look at this work and if I didn't know you personally, like I don't know if I'd fully, and I'm happy about this, fully understand the position of art history, which is like this is a painter that could being like the past is a derelict alley that I don't need to go off of. I have new languages to speak and say. And then there's also a part of me that's like this person wants to build off of Cy Twombly, maybe, or there is like a type of language that is like being continued, reinvented, reappropriated, and taken further than it could have. And I'm wondering, I know it's a tough question to answer, but your how you feel relating yourself to like a history of painting, like is there an obligation you feel to it, or is it really you're you're off on your own building a new language?
Well, I think that it's pretty impossible to build your own language unless you were to live in a vacuum. I think that for me,
Mhm.
having the access to all of these incredible lecturers and people that had dedicated their lives to the study of the history of art and were just talking at me for years. I mean, that really affected me so much. Starting with I used to want to be in conservation. I was obsessed with like the prehistoric art and cave paintings, the conservation efforts, and particularly in Lascaux at the time when I was at Pratt, and I just wanted to like go there and help them save these caves. Like that was my whole, I just wanted to, I was really, 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 this painting kind of has a little bit of the cave painting, I don't know, the creature in the forefront of this painting kind of looks like one to me. But to answer your question, I think that I have so many, my mind is so full of all of the artists that I love so much. I mean, all I do is read them and look at their work. I look at art every day. I go to shows every day. I mean, but of course you can't let one get in too deeply. You can't let, it's almost like I'm just overwhelmed with love for so many artists that I can't even, there's so many. I don't know. It's almost like an overwhelm of influences. So yeah.
Cool. That comes through. I mean, the type of oversaturation and finding a way to, digest and come up with a way forward from it. But what I really appreciate with your work, Caroline, I mean, many things, but there is a generosity to so much of it. Like going into your studio and seeing the palettes, just they're like stalactites of pigment, of just like so much texture being laid down. You're using so much color, you're laying so much down that you're committed, and then you uncommit yourself from it. There's an obligation to history, but also all this is just a real belief in painting itself, or like a real um, excitement to be involved in that process of making painting. And it's incredible to see. And it's not one note, because I do think that there are some registers of, like you said, future nostalgia or heartbreak to it. But I'm just really appreciative of the show. I could ask a million other questions. I want to give our audience a chance to do so. And thank you so much for sharing your work with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much, Caroline and Andrew.
Of course.
So fascinating to listen to. We have some questions from the audience. First question is from Emily. Your color palette looks more limited than in past bodies of work. How did you make color choices and or omissions for the silver color?
Thank you for that question. I love it. It's not so much that it's limited, it's actually less limited because I introduced earth tones and grays into the universe of my paintings, which has been really fruitful to explore because one of my good painter friends came to my studio a few years ago, and this might have been the beginning of it all. I don't know, maybe this one comment, but he was like, if you love to use bright colors, then you should try to use some grays around them because they're brighter when you have, it's like everything kind of brightens when it's not surrounded by other bright things. And so just technically speaking, that made a lot of sense to me, and I started working with a lot of grays and earth tones. And then I found that it was doing a lot more for me. I was starting to connect with them on a deeper level and it was it's the color palette has developed.
Thank you, Caroline. The next question is from an anonymous member in the audience. Can you go into detail about your medium use in your process? How long does it take to dry for another layer to be added?
So I use just the standard mix of Gamsol with linseed oil. But then a lot of times, sometimes if I'm layering to get that transparency, I do kind of experiment. Like I'll do the alkylate, the fast drying stuff. And then recently I've been using liquid because it dries so fast. It's actually scary how fast it dries, but mostly just linseed oil. And then it's very wet as I'm working with it. So nothing really dries. I'm working wet on wet most of the time, always. Unless I'm doing bright whites at the very end or something like that, like the hot pink painting, those bright whites were at the very end.
Thank you. The next question is from me, and it's kind of going off of the second question. I was curious whether the pace of your painting is like an important and conscious choice, or whether it's more an intuitive process. I think there are moments of very like fast brushstrokes and then very intentional sort of erasure that's happening kind of constantly. And what I also found really interesting was the way you described how you like to have your canvases flat and sometimes how that changes the pace in which the paint spreads. I wanted to hear whether velocity and pace of your painting is an important part of your process.
Yes, it's very, very important because once you're in it, like the rhythm of it, then you can't really leave. And I didn't really mention this before, but I work for very long periods of time, very long sessions. And I love doing that, truly, because, and of course, there's a lot of rest and repair that needs to happen before and after, but that there's no other way to achieve that pace, and the kind of getting into that feeling, of the painting, and I think it has to do with allowing yourself the necessary amount of time required to get into that zone. I don't know. And then of course the drying and the other sessions, then you have to stop. But stopping is the worst part. Like I wish that I didn't have to wait for paint to dry at all.
Thank you. The next question is from Sasha. What is your studio practice like? Do you have any daily routines or rituals?
Yes. So yeah, well, I was gonna mention earlier to Andrew, but I forgot. The meditation that I do is it's called hemisync. I don't know if anyone has heard of it, but it's you wear headphones and it has these like frequencies in each ear, and then it does this thing where your mind is it's so wild if you just try it. I think it's on like I think it's you can easily find it. But whatever that does, whatever however it works, it really works for me. So I meditate with that. And then I like burn some incense, classic ritual things. Um and then, drink some I don't know. It's very standard. Sit there, stare at the wall, stare at the blank canvas, and yeah, say your prayers. So yeah.
The next question is from Lucy. I saw your work for the first time at Frederick and Freiser's group show, and then again at your solo with them. I felt like it had changed a lot in the sense that regardless of how beautiful it always has been, it doesn't seem like you are concerned at all with winning anyone over. It looks like you paint for yourself, and as you've continued to do that, the work has become stronger and more powerful. I'm a young painter, also currently RISD painting MFA. Do you have any advice for a painter like myself trying to make work that comes from your heart and transcend audience concerns? Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Wow, thank you. That means a lot to me. The things that I would say is, wow. You're never really gonna ever, I'm very young, so I don't know. I don't know anything. The more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know. And I think that like you're never gonna feel like you fully are doing the right thing. So then why not? Like at this point, why not just paint from your heart of hearts? Like there's no like mountaintop to reach. You're just here. I don't know. That's I love that question. But live, oh, okay. I would say, one last thing. One last thing. I would say, look at a lot of art, but don't look at it like too hard right now because it's very easy to we're sponges. You're gonna absorb everything. Make sure you try to paint without looking at stuff too hard. I don't know. Someone gave me that advice and I loved it years ago.
Our last question is from Fong. Fong, if you're ready, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah,
Hi, Fong.
hi. Sorry, I couldn't be there in LA to attend your opening. But you know, it's interesting to hear you describing, of course, your use of tonality that Andrew was indicated. I'm not so sure how accurate this is, but I know because I don't remember citing it anywhere in the literature of Bryce Morton, but Klaus Curtis once told me that when Bryce was in the last year at Yale graduate school, a remarkable class, 1964, Richard Serra was there and was still a painter. He painted between Hans Hofmann and Pollock, and Bryce was painting more or less in the manner of Franz Klein, and Chuck Close was painting under the influence of de Kooning. It's so interesting. And Rackstraw Down was painting under the influence of his professor, their professor, Al Hale. So everybody was doing their thing. Nancy Graves and he said to the tail end, the very last month of the second year, he asked all of his painter friends not to throw away the sediment of the turpentine when you wash your brushes, please give it to me. So he could collect all the sediment of the paint in the bottom. And then that's how he created his monochrome painting. That's beautiful gray because it's unpredictable. Whatever muddy below that create that whole tonality, that was the case. But I've been told twice, but I never saw it written anywhere. And I never somehow remember asking Bryce about it. Which brings me to my question, super slowly, sorry. I'm digesting, I'm still talking away here. But once Matisse brought over paintings when he was in Nice during the war, and he brought back and managed to get Renoir to come visit his studio. Renoir wasn't so exactly thrilled seeing Matisse painting, but he says one thing very concrete. He said, you certainly know how to use black color very well. And then later, someone else asked him, why do you use black? This is the time, this is a bit earlier maybe, when he was trying to catch up with Cubism. He's 9 years older than Picasso. So we talk about, the piano lesson, the Moroccans, all these marvelous early Matisse. And his answer was so compelling. He said, I use black in order to cool down the blue. And it's super interesting because when you look at the flame in the gas stove, the hottest color is blue, not the red, not the orange. Isn't that interesting? So I learned that. Okay, so now the question comes. Andrew and I did this performance at Anton Kern, where he dressed up to be like William Blake, and I were Immanuel Kant. So we were talking about romanticism, dark vein romanticism, and we were talking about Kant being the great critic of all his younger romantic idealist philosopher. He was so critical to the point where he became them. So I'm asking because we talk about Hegel's sublation. Hegel dialectic is really interesting because he's trying to bring the parallel, the aspect of abstract intellectual, then the dialectic or the negative rational, and the speculation, or what otherwise called positive rational, in order to bring that to that sublation, which means to hold, to lift up, to destroy, and to preserve. So that's what it is. So all of that back and forth to bring a greater synthesis of preserving, negating, canceling, I'm interested in how the fact that you paint relatively thinly, but there's so much labor involved in that cancellation process to putting things back. And how do you distribute that all over distribution? Because it's definitely interesting to hear you talk about the edges of the painting to reveal what the underneath paint is, kind of almost like a weather forecast. You laying out the weather in order to bring in light, darkness, tonality. So that's what was my question now? I forgot. Forgive me. The question is that, is there a prevailing dark sensibility that you were attracted to? Okay, that's a question. Thank you.
Dark, as in
Moody,
dark.
moody,
Yes. Absolutely.
violent,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. I would say absolutely yes. The act of destruction itself is a type of violence, but I think that nature is violent, and storms and like hurricanes and all that. They were my favorite things ever growing up. There was actually a tornado that ran through my neighborhood and split houses open so that you could see inside the houses, and all the little chairs and like things inside the house of other people's lives were visible to me. And those moments of like natural destruction have really stuck with me. And I think that there's no way that they do not come out in my painting. Yeah, there's no way.
Huh. And where did you grow up?
South Carolina. Well, North Carolina and South Carolina. We moved. But yeah, there were some tornadoes and crazy storms that happened, and I was basically just outside for my whole entire childhood. I was just out in the woods hanging out.
Huh.
So
cool. Yeah. Well, that explains everything, didn't it? Okay, thank you. I gotta rethink everything now. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Andrew. Back to you, man.
Of course.
Thanks everyone for sending us those thoughtful questions. Caroline, we're gonna end with a reading, correct?
Yes. So the reading has a lot to do with a lot of what we spoke about. It's by Rebecca Solnit, and she's speaking on the color blue. Okay. The world is blue at its edges and in its depths. This blue is the light that got lost. Light at the blue end of the spectrum does not travel the whole distance from the sun to us. It disperses among the molecules of the air. It scatters in water. Water is colorless. Shallow water appears to be the color of whatever lies underneath it, but deep water is full of the scattered light. The purer the water, the deeper the blue. The sky is blue for the same reason, but the blue at the horizon, the blue of land that seems to be dissolving into the sky, is a deeper, dreamier, melancholy blue. The blue at the farthest reaches of the places where you see for miles, the blue of distance. This light that does not touch us does not travel the whole distance. The light that gets lost gives us the beauty of the world, so much of which is in the color blue. For many years, I've been moved by the blue at the far edge of what can be seen, that color of horizons, of remote mountain ranges, of anything far away. The color of that distance is the color of an emotion, the color of solitude and of desire, the color of there seen from here, the color of where you are not, and the color of where you can never go. For the blue is not in the place those miles away at the horizon, but in the atmospheric distance between you and the mountains. Longing, says the poet Robert Haas, because desire is full of endless distances. Blue is the color of longing for the distances you never arrive in, for that blue world.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Caroline and Andrew. Thank you to the Journal Gallery team for their support in preparing for today's program. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. You can support our work through the link in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Alison Hokanson, Joanna Shears-Seidenstein, and Jason Rosenfeld on Caspar David Friedrich, The Soul of Nature, on view at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And as it is a Rail tradition, you can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye as you leave. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Caroline, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful
Bye.
talking today.
Thank
Seeing all of you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Andrew.
Bye.
Bye.
Good seeing you,
Congratulations.
Fawn. Good seeing you,
Thank
Mom,
you.
Maggie,
Thank
Chloe.
you, Caroline. Thank you,
Thanks so much. That was awesome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank
Go see
you.
the show, everybody. Those of you in LA.